Welcome. I'm Stephen Garvey with National Citizens Alliance. Uh, Tonight we have a panel of members from across the country, and we're going to be discussing what's happening with our freedoms in the country and what's happening with the democracy from the standpoint of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We have a chat display there, so whatever comments you put up will be on display. Make sure our panel guests today, could you please make sure you don't have this playing while it's on? Because otherwise it's going to feed back in. So we're going to refer to the NCA Constitution to show where we're coming from a value standpoint. And please share your comments, and we will address them all. And today we have Maria from Vancouver, Jesse from Edmonton, we have Philip from Northern Ontario, and we have Marcine. Where are you living, Marcine, right now?
North of Vancouver.
North of Vancouver. So, and we may have other members coming in today. So I'm just going to put up this screen here. So this is the NCA Constitution. I'm just going to go back here. Make sure everyone who's the panel guests, I hear myself talking. That means someone is playing the video. Just make sure none of you have this playing in front of you. And make sure you're all on headset. No speakerphone. That type of thing. So this is the NCA Constitution, and you can find this on our party page. So right here, I'm just going to go back here for a second. Right here, we have values, Article 5 values. This is on our party page, nationalcitizensalliance.ca. So the basic values we're coming from, NCA members, supporters, is freedom, fairness, equality, transparency, accountability, and inclusiveness, especially regarding gender and minority status. Those are the core values that we operate from. Then I just want to scroll down to another section here. This is under freedom of speech, section 4C. Quote, NCA members enjoy freedom of speech. However, federal law does not allow hate speech, including discriminatory or racist speech. NCA agrees with this position, and breaching such laws may result in expulsion from the party. So those are the core values that we're operating from. So now I'm going to shift to the charter, and we can just get an idea of what this charter is. Most Canadians probably have never even looked at the charter, but we're going to do a quick brief analysis of it. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us tonight. I'm going to switch over to the charter now. Here it is here. You can get this on the Justice site, Government of Canada. It's difficult to find this. It's embedded in there now. But the first thing we need to look at is the opening statement, quote, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. In my opinion, that's pretty vague. It shows that there's a religious component to the charter, the supremacy of God, what God, all gods, that's unclear, and the rule of law. We shift to the guarantee of rights and freedoms. And the most important one is number one, quote, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. That's really important. Philip, can you touch on that? Jesse, do you want to touch on that? Marcine, do you want to touch on it?
I'll hit that. Well, right off the top, we're talking about measures that are reasonable or justified. So the question begs again, are the billions of dollars spent on these measures justified? Not include the provinces have spent, it's well over 350 billion. Measures that violate multiple sections of the Charter. And just want to touch on the point of God. And I interpret that to mean spirituality as opposed to religion. So I like that it has that aspect.
But it is vague, Marcine. It is vague. The supremacy of God.
It
right?
is most certainly vague, but what I appreciate about it is it's not religious. So it's not identifying any religion. It's just simply saying God, whoever your God is.
Yes. Okay, I'm getting echo now. Could you make sure no one's on speaker?
I'm not on speaker.
Maria, I think okay, how's that? Marcine, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Okay, good. I think that cleared it up. I want to make it very clear that Section 1 sets limits on our freedoms and rights as stated in the Charter. And we're going to talk about how the Supreme Court decides when the government can infringe on our freedoms and rights. But they call it reasonable limits in the context of a free and democratic society. Remember that. And we're going to have to look at what is this free and democratic society. I'm going to go back to the Charter here. The fundamental freedoms. Number 2, everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of consciousness and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, expression, including freedom of the press and other media communication, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. Obviously, these are being infringed upon over the last year and a half. Any comments, Jesse, on those?
Nope.
Maria?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Okay, I want to be very clear that there's things missing in the Charter, and we're going to talk about them as we go through it. We have our own amendments. I'm going to go back to the Charter. So then we talk about democratic rights. This is about the right to vote, the duration of the Legislative Assembly, the House of Commons, when it can be discontinued, when there's apprehended war, invasion, insurrection, etc. And it talks about the sitting of the Parliament. That's pretty vague for democratic rights. You just have a right to vote. There's nothing in there about a fair playing field for the political process. Remember that. That's a big red flag right there. Mobility rights, the right to enter, remain, and leave Canada. Right now, these are under attack under the lockdown virus and the lockdowns that have been going on. People have been their ability to move, their right to move in their communities, within the province, from provinces, out of the country are being diminished. The right to move and take up residence in any province. That's a right to move and gain a livelihood. That's under infringement right now. And then we go down to legal rights. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, the right not to be deprived thereof in accordance with principles of fundamental justice. Everyone has the right to secure and unreasonable search and seizure. This is this has been compromised right here during the lockdown virus as well. Everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily detained or imprisoned. It would be clear, like the recent pastor who was detained and imprisoned. It appears that this is being compromised as well. Arrest, detention, it's about the process there. Criminal matters, treatment, punishment, equality rights. This is about without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, skin, sex, age, mental, physical disability. Official languages. And then there's an important one on the Aboriginals. The duty, the obligation to consult Aboriginals. The duty to consult Aboriginals. And does anyone have any comments?
Well, it appears to me we have several parties violating not only the Charter of Rights, but we're falling now into violations under the Nuremberg Code as well.
Maria? Maria, any comments on this?
I'll come back to it. All
right. Okay. Jesse?
Yeah, well, basically, our Constitution is being trampled on because our rights and freedoms seem to be taken away, and our right to travel, our right to, even travel from province to province, I hear that they're stopping people as well. So this is, against a free and democratic society.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about the limitations now. And I'm just looking at Phil here. I'm trying to rejoin. Hold on a sec here. We're just going to get Phil back in here. So here is the basis for the Supreme Court. This is what they use to. It's called the Oakes test. This is what the Supreme Court uses to determine when the government can take away our rights and freedoms. So I'm just going to read here, quote, determining what is reasonable and justified can be a challenging task. What is reasonable to me might be very unreasonable to you. The Supreme Courts have established a test called the Oakes test to help them with this task of determining if a limit to the charter, right, or freedom is reasonable, justified within the meaning of Section 1 of the Charter. And these are the basic things that the Supreme Court goes through. Keep in mind that the Supreme Court is appointed by whoever's in government. The establishment parties that have been in government have appointed these judges. And so they're actually deciding this. And it's important to note they are deciding it from their perspective. Their perspective is not absolute. It is overarching of Canadian society, but their opinion in and of itself is not absolute. So they will have their own biases. Number one, objective. Limiting the charter protected right or freedom serves a pressing, substantial objective that aligns with the values of a so-called free and democratic society. So the government would argue that because of the threats from this health crisis, there's a substantial pressing need to lock down to prevent further harm to people. That's what I would assume they would argue. Second, rational connection. The law or action that limits a charter right or freedom is carefully designed to meet its objective. A law or action does not necessarily effectively achieve the desired objective, is not rationally connected to its purpose, and therefore it would not be upheld. So there must be a rational connection between what the government is doing in relation to its objective. You would argue in this case they're trying to minimize the spread of this health concern, minimize the harm to the public. 3, minimal impairment. The law or government action should achieve its objective while impairing rights and freedom as little as possible. If there is an alternative method of achieving the objective that causes less harm to the rights or freedoms, that alternative may be a better option. So it's looking at different options here, and whether there are better, less harmful to our rights and freedoms alternatives. I would argue that there is. NCA has advocated that a better approach to deal with the lockdown virus is to allow the majority of society to get on with their lives and focus all our energy on protecting the most vulnerable. That's been our position from day one. The governments at the municipal, provincial, and federal level have chosen to lock everyone down and therefore impair the rights and freedoms of all Canadians. So you would argue that that was not the better option to take. That's what NCA would argue, and therefore it was this lockdown is unconstitutional. Proportionality. The benefits gained by meeting the objective should outweigh the harms caused by limiting the right or freedom. The more serious the infringement on rights and freedoms, the more we should expect a real pressing substantial benefit to society to be gained. Again, they're arguing that this health concern is a threat to everyone. It's a threat to society, and therefore they have to curtail our rights and freedoms. Again, NCA would argue that it's not only it's disproportional, and there's better alternatives that do less harm to our rights and freedoms. For example, as we said, letting most Canadians get on with their life, because about 99% have mild symptoms who have had this health concern, and focus all our energy on protecting those most vulnerable. It could be people with health conditions, seniors, vulnerable seniors. Any comments from the panel?
Yeah, one thing we can do to protect our vulnerable, but also protect our citizens, is make sure everybody's getting their vitamin C, their vitamin D, their zinc. These are much better options, because if you increase your immunity, your chances of being harmed by this significantly decreases. And this is the first time in history that they've ever quarantined healthy people. This has never happened, that people are now causing lots of mental health issues, lots of suicide. So which risk outweighs which one, when you have people that are getting mentally sick and actually taking their own lives.
Exactly. Maria, any comments?
Yeah, so I guess, it's okay for people to congregate at Costco, 200-300 people at one time, and it's not okay to go to a church to sing. And it's also, all the restaurant dining is is prohibited, so that actually stifles the ability for musicians to make a living because they have to perform in restaurants and clubs. So, that's affecting the basic right to make a living.
Yeah, so this is the arbitrariness of the government. I'm getting echo again, Maria. Could you? There you go. This is the arbitrariness of the government, Jesse. They have their own biases. I'll give you an example. It's like when they said you're an essential worker, you're not an essential worker. Who are they to decide that? Right?
Quite right. Quite
And
right.
so again, what they're arguing, Maria, is that the church gatherings are not essential, but getting food to live is essential. But again, who are they, the top-down government, to decide that? Did they ask the Canadian people? Because it may very well, there may be a highly religious person, and going to the church is integral to their life, as much it is as eating. Maria? So this is the government imputing its biases on the Canadian people. I'm 100% convinced that this whole lockdown on all levels of government has been completely unconstitutional because of the inherent biases in it. It's disproportionate, and there's better alternatives they could have done. Jesse?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And, I think it's a lot more than just, what they're telling us. I think that there's a bigger agenda behind it, and that's why they're trampling on the Constitution the way they are.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. But Richard, do you have any comments on this? Do you believe that this lockdown virus is constitutional after everything I've shared tonight?
I agree with you 100%, Stephen. It's discriminatory, arbitrary. There's no science behind any of this. It's just arbitrary measures. Even Bonnie Henry herself said there's no science to this. So
I can't hear him.
Yeah, could you speak up, please?
Can't hear me? Can you hear me okay
Yeah.
now?
Your mic seems it's either covered or it's really turned down because you sound very muffled and very hard to hear.
Yes.
Okay, let me just get back to me. I'll see if I can turn my mic up.
But until Richard comes in, I'm just going to add. I just don't see the proportionality here. That's my interpretation, Jesse, and I see the inherent bias of the government. I don't think it's their place. They have to be factual, objective. It's not their place to be partial and biased when it comes to our rights and freedoms.
And we know they've been lying because this PCR test,
Don't go into that, please.
Okay.
We don't want to be censored any more than we are. Just keep it health concerns. Keep it general.
Okay, I got
There's
my
many
mic
health
better
concerns.
now?
Yeah, go ahead, Marcine.
Well, the self-quarantine, for instance, causing undue emotional and physical distress, social distancing, which is a fictional concept, the primordial right, so all this mask mandating, hand sanitizer, there's absolutely no, they're quite toxic in fact, and not approved by any government. Temperature taking should only be done by a medical professional. Dude at a restaurant asking for ID, closure of all non-essential businesses for you to decide what's essential and not essential. very arbitrary and unjustified. Closure of churches and parks and playgrounds, again, arbitrary, unjustified. The testing, we won't go there. Multiple violations, and who's accountable? The Chief Medical Officer of Canada, as well as the Chief Medical Officer for the provinces, none of which are elected officials. So therefore not accountable whatsoever.
Yeah, but there's
so why are we taking
political
orders from people? They're not accountable.
there's political
liable.
There's Marcine, there's political puppets.
Wearing a mask.
Yeah, fair enough. But Marcine, there's political puppets there who are making the decisions. Understand that. All right? Marcine, do you understand that?
Absolutely, there is.
Okay,
yes,
what I
do understand. What I say is, why are we taking orders?
But yeah, I don't.
I 100% understand it. But
we're not taking orders.
I do have questions about it.
These political puppets, whether it's Ford, Kenney, or Trudeau, are making the ultimate decision on what's to be done. Don't skirt it off to some health official. All right? They're giving them the information and they're deciding what to do. Right? And that's the fact. So hold them accountable. Don't let them off the hook, whether it's Trudeau, Ford, or Kenney. Okay? But I'm gonna a very important point tonight I want to make is about what's not in the charter. When it comes to democratic rights, it's about as vague as it comes. All the Canadian people have is the right to vote, which is great. But there's nothing in there about a fair playing field, a fair electoral playing field, so parties like NCA can compete fairly with these establishment entities. Understand that. So I'm asking everyone, how is our society free and democratic? Who is it democratic to and who is it against? It seems like it's tilted to the establishment. Everything in there, Jesse.
Everything.
I've looked at the electoral law. Electoral law is completely biased to establishment parties. How is that free and democratic? How? It's only free and democratic to a select few. Right? Look at our freedoms. What's happening to them? This is arbitrary. This is coming from almost all levels of government. They're imposing lockdowns that are having severe impacts on small business, on families. And we argue it's unconstitutional. Yet, if we go to the Supreme Court, which has been appointed by the establishment, what will they decide? Maria?
It's going to be difficult because the judges are usually brought off for it's a tough battle.
Yeah, so the basis of the charter is a free and democratic society. Yet I'm questioning who is it free for? Who is it democratic for? It should be free and democratic for all Canadians, not a select few. And that's what we're dealing with here. I believe that we're living in a plutocracy that is masked by this notion of free and democratic, but it's really not. Any comments, Jesse?
No, not on this point.
But that's what we're fighting. But another really important point, I'm going to get to these comments. Thank you, Jake. Another important point is what is not in the charter. So we're going to look at our constitutional amendments to get understanding of that. But I did mention the democratic rights. It's about as vague as you can imagine. What we would like to see is a fair playing field for all political participants. You know, we're dealing with a biased mainstream media. We're dealing with elections laws that's totally tilted to the establishment parties. That's not democratic. But let's get to these constitutional amendments.
Hi, Stephen.
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Can we let Richard speak now? Because he's
Yeah, I'm
got
trying to
his...
get him in.
Okay.
Can you see him there?
Yeah, I could see him.
Can you hear me now?
Can you click on letting him in?
No,
No, he's already in. But
I
it's
just don't
He's
see.
in, but
It's just his mic is a
his
little low.
microphone.
Can you hear
No,
me?
the
His
problem
microphone
is
is really
I can't see him on the screen.
Oh, I can see him. Can you
Yeah,
see?
we can all see him, Stephen, and we can
Yeah.
hear him, but he's still muffled.
I'm still muffled.
Yeah.
Can you?
I
Could
Uh,
you? Do you have?
I have
Yeah. Do you have
another-
any
Jesse?
headphones or?
I have a different microphone here. Hold
Oh,
on.
okay.
Okay. Try
Go
that.
ahead, Richard.
Is that better?
We can hear you better than before.
No.
You'll have to speak up louder.
Okay, how's that? Is that better?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with Stephen 100% about these so-called health measures. They're arbitrary, unconstitutional, discriminatory. We attended the JCCF constitutional challenge at the Supreme Court, and the lawyer Paul Jaffe, that was his basic argument, was that these health measures are arbitrary and discriminatory. You know, Walmart, Costco, big box stores are allowed to stay open, and small restaurants not. Small business forced to shut down. And now the you know, Bonnie Henry's latest mandate making indoor dining, banning indoor dining, but you're okay if you have a patio. You know, people get on planes right now with 300 people stuffed in a plane with recycled air, and that's okay. So there's no science to any of these measures. There's no peer-reviewed study of social distancing or stay at home. None of this has any scientific backing whatsoever. So that seems to be, as well as a constitutional challenge. It has to be based on the onus on the governments, the provincial and federal governments, to produce evidence of that any of these measures actually are working. So that would be my comment.
No, that's an excellent point, Richard, and that just piles on to what I was saying. It's really troubling, you know, and I'm coming back to the charter. You know, we have rights and freedoms in there, and there's some good ones in there: freedom of thought, freedom of speech, Jesse. But they're under attack. It's not only during this lockdown virus that they're under attack. We've been under censorship for over the last 3 years. So how's that consistent with freedom of speech? You know, they give freedom of the mainstream media to do their stuff, but then they're doing all kinds of online censorship. Jesse?
Yeah, so the censorship that we've been getting and most people have been getting, comes from these private, you know, entities. It's not government censorship. So, but we have been hearing that, you know, Trudeau has been wanting to stop any, you know, and actually mandate from the government, you know, that they want to put censorship throughout, you know, if people are going against what their plan here is. And then that is coming from the government, because when we sign up to these actual, you know, apps, you know, we're not under, you know, we're under their guidelines, and what they want to do with their, and how they want to censor, who they want, that's you know, based on what that app does. It has nothing to do with the government or the Constitution. Now, if we were a fair and just government, like, you know, we will be when the NCA comes into party, we can actually mandate to some of these apps and stick up for our citizens and say, you know, the censorship's not allowed if you're going to do business, you know, within our country.
Yeah, well, we can also make a constitutional case that these online spaces are a public domain, like a public gathering spot, and that they shouldn't be subject to censorship. We have laws in Canada against hate speech, against threats of violence, and let the police authorities deal with it. But that should be an open domain. And the federal government has been working with Facebook, Jesse. They've been meeting with them. And they actually, and I just can't believe this, they actually tried to put this into the election law, Maria, Section 91, but they didn't want anyone criticizing them during elections. It's kind of like the fact seekers seeping into the election law, but it was ruled unconstitutional, Jesse. This is what we're up against. But I want to talk about what's not in the charter now briefly, and this will open your eyes further. So this is on our policy, our platform and policy page. The first one that we're talking about is the freedom of conscience and religion. We're arguing that that is vague and potentially in conflict with the so-called free and democratic society. What if there's an organization portraying itself as religious that is against democracy, that is against freedom? Why should they have a charter right to freely operate in Canada when they're violating our basic values of so-called free and democratic society? Therefore, we argue under special circumstances, quote, freedom of consciousness and religion within the limits of extreme radical ideology that violates a fundamentally free and democratic society. And that's one of the amendments we would put forth. The second one, that in the Charter rights and freedoms, there is zero right to privacy for any Canadian citizen. That is not considered a constitutional right. Canadian citizens do not have a constitutional right to privacy. That's why the government can do its dragnet surveillance. They can set up cameras on the streets. They can do facial recognition like the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are doing. This is wrong in NCA's opinion. We, especially with advancement in surveillance technology, including online censorship and surveillance, we believe there should be a freedom of reasonable privacy for Canadian citizens. Third,
we need to mandate that they are protected. Our citizens should be protected.
but
we need to mandate that.
We want that as a charter right, Jesse.
Yeah.
And right now it's not in there. The
Steve?
third one is,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I was going to mention financial surveillance. So in a way, we're already under the surveillance of our financial situation. So everything we make, we have to report to the government. Everything that's revenue based, the government wants to know. So we're already being tracked that way.
Yeah, and there's also we're documenting the surveillance grid that's going up.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously all kinds of online censorship. We know under the Harper regime, he spent $1 billion setting up kind of like what they have in the U.S., a mass dragnet surveillance of Canadians, right? So we know that's already there, and I've been personally documenting these cameras going up everywhere. So that's a physical component now to the surveillance that's going up, coupled with the facial recognition that's already used by government agencies. Where is this going? And I ask everyone, how is this consistent with a free and democratic society? How is a surveillance police state consistent with a free and democratic society? How are the actions of governments that blatantly violate our basic rights and freedoms, the vague ones that are in the charter, consistent with a free and democratic society? Further, what kind of society are we really living in? I would argue, as I mentioned, a plutocracy with huge machinations of government, the media, the courts, the political fronts, the people in the shadows, the organization, the corporations, some of them, right? That's what we're dealing with in this country. I argue it's a sham, the whole thing. The people have never voted on this charter. It was rammed down their throats by the same people who are pushing the lockdown virus on everyone. How is that consistent with a free and democratic society? You know that saying, where's the revolution? People need to wake up.
We are the revolution.
Yeah, people need to wake up. And please share your comments. We're going to get back to them. Unfortunately, one of our members, Philip, was unable to participate tonight, but share your comments, Philip, and we will get to them. It looks like he's doing that. Back to this, everyone. Another thing in the charter is about the equalization payouts. On the surface, it's great, but we argue at NCA it is detrimental to the provinces and Canada as a whole by adding to the welfare entitlement federal governments through handouts to less productive provinces and penalizing more productive provinces and decreasing competition between provinces. So we would want that taken out of the charter. I know it's controversial, but we have to do what's best for the people as a whole. More entitlement, more handouts, people getting something for nothing. We don't think that is conducive to the best society to live in. The fourth one, there's nothing in there, Jesse, about a right to private property for any Canadian citizen. You do not have a right to your private property. Jesse, it's not in there. That is not a charter right.
And that's why they're trampling on right now with the capital gains. If you sell your home, now it's part of capital gains and they want to take a percentage of it. That's the currently being proposed.
There you go. So we want what we would like to see in there. Everyone has the right to private property, except the government can take private property for reasonable public use and not without just compensation. For example, there may be a house beside a new project to build a highway and they have to relocate, that type of situation. But it would have to be reasonable public use. And here's another very significant one. There's nothing in the charter that establishes the right to self-defense. Nothing in there. You do not have the right, charter right, to defend you and yourself and your family from threats to your lives.
Case in point, there was a farmer who there was some robbers on his property. He did a warning shot. It ricocheted and ended up shooting him in the leg, and he ended up getting charged.
There you go. There's no right to self-defense in there. Come on. That is a basic right every Canadian deserves. Especially when your life, of you and your family is in jeopardy.
Question, Stephen.
Go ahead.
So if we don't live in a country with guns, what are we going to be using for self-defense? Because in this, yeah, like Second Amendment rights, like, because we're in Canada, we don't have guns. So what are we using to self-defend?
We do
There
have
are-
guns. We
there
do have
are
guns here.
There's millions
Well-
of law-abiding firearm owners.
Yeah, but we're not all trained to.
No, but
To
you
use
can
them.
defend yourself in other ways, whatever means is you can to protect you and your family without
So
unnecessary.
say you know karate, and you use
Whatever
karate.
ways you can. Use a knife, use whatever you can at your
Okay.
disposal. It's a right to defend you and your family when you're being threatened, whether by an intruder or whatever.
Okay.
This is not in there. And this is something NCA wants in there, the right to self-defense. The right to self-defense needs to be a charter right. That is fundamental to any basic right. It's kind of ironic. In the charter, they talk about life and liberty, to enjoy your life and liberty, but there's no right to protect it. So again, you're dependent on the government to protect you and your family. The charter is all about the establishment. It's not about the Canadian people. You see where I'm going? You connect the dots here. It's all about government control. Because it was never written by the people. It was never agreed upon by the people through a national plebiscite, a national vote. That's a big one. Another one in here we would add. We think this should be in here. If any Canadian acts treasonous to the country, they should forfeit their rights and freedoms. So we have here. Go ahead.
And all of their, property and wealth
Yeah.
and stuff.
So I'm talking about the Omar Khadr case. That kind of brought that issue up. How someone could be operating against us, but because they were just a child close to an adult, that we actually paid them 10.5 million. It's unbelievable. But we would add any Canadian citizen or otherwise, regardless of age, who engages in acts of war against our country and or our allies forfeits all his or her freedoms and rights.
Does that include a loss of citizenship? Would a person become a stateless person under that amendment?
Yes, they would.
Well, then, where would they go? If we can't deport them anywhere because they wouldn't be a citizen, and they can't if they're if you don't
Bill's
have,
here.
just
Hold on
it's
a
just a
sec.
question.
It's just another form of status, Richard. You're a citizen, you're a permanent resident, you're a resident. It would just be another classification.
Oh, okay. So you'd be
Outcast.
Yeah. It's just-
downgraded. So is it
It's sort of a semantics there, Richard.
just asking? And
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point.
yeah, the other question, I don't know do you mind if we go back to one of the earlier amendments just briefly?
Yeah.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
About the radical ideologies. You mentioned Sharia law. Are you considering other non-religious radical militant groups or like Antifa or KKK or
100% applies to any form of radical extremism.
Okay.
Where they have an agenda, where on it's not conscious of thought, but practice on the ground where they're acting in ways that their agenda, their manifesto, everything that they stand for is counter to so-called free and democratic society.
Okay, I mean that's like fairly specific, but also pretty broad. Um, Also, like it could open a can of worms as to
It
what.
could open them, but we need that.
But
It
maybe
would.
it's a can of worms that needs to be
I
debated.
think it does need to be opened up because why should groups be operating here in the name of religion or just operating as a group when they are a hostile, they are completely a radical to our basic values. And I'm not just talking about someone believing something or having conscious of thought, but actually on the ground practicing what they're saying.
Right.
Right? That's what that's about. I know it's controversial, but it's something we need to debate, Richard.
Yeah, yeah. I think I saw where you're going. I just saw just the one example, so I thought
Oh yeah,
if there were other examples, it would be helpful for not to, because it kind of looks almost singling out one
no,
person.
no,
But
no,
I
no,
think you weren't saying that, but I'm just
not at all, not at all,
might be
not at
helpful.
all. It applies to any. It could be any group, whatever. But that needs to be discussed, and we'll probably have an internal meeting on that and discuss it and hash it out further.
Okay, great. Sounds great.
Yeah. But yeah, we certainly don't advocate singling out any group. When it comes to an issue like radical extremes, that applies across the whole spectrum.
Yeah, and there's a big spectrum
There
nowadays.
is. It could be KKK, Nazi on one side. We got Antifa, whatever on the other side, right?
Yeah.
That all that thrown in. But we have to be careful there. We want freedom of conscience, freedom of belief. But if there's militant groups operating within our society,
Hmm.
why should they be allowed to hide behind the freedom of religion?
Right, right, or
That's
freedom of conscience. Like I think you hit the word on the head, or hit the nail on the head there with word militant. I think that's where it really uh, uh, contradicts society's values when they become militant and start arming themselves and becoming really aggressive.
yes, exactly. So that's something we need to look at, and but it's just about being consistent. But let's get back to this amendment here. And this other one here, Constitution Amendment 8, this is about establishing the secular nature of government. That there's a definitive separation between religion and state. Um, um, we're concerned about certain groups having influence on the government, but we think the government should be fundamentally secular. So that's something we would have in the democratic right section. The House of Commons and any legislative body shall abide at all times by a clear, definitive separation of religion and state. And finally, here, Constitutional Amendment 9 it's about the Section 35(2). Um, um, we think the consultation of Aboriginal peoples of Canada should apply to all Aboriginal people, not just select few who are in bed with the government. So we would update it to all Indian, Inuit, Métis peoples of Canada, coast to coast, and without restriction or prejudice. And we don't. We want to make sure all Aboriginal people are consulted. But right now, you could argue only the ones who are in bed with the government or close to the government are being consulted. So those are our amendments, and I think it really exposes some things here, doesn't it? Jesse?
Yeah, there's holes in our constitution, and people are not protected. Citizens are not protected, and it leans towards protecting the establishment and not the citizens who are supposed to be we the people.
Yeah. Philip, are you there? Philip? I can't hear him, but he's there. Uh, so right now we're gonna get to our comments here. Philip's not able to speak. That's unfortunate, but we're gonna get to the comments now. But I just want to get back to free and democratic society. I want to ask our panel tonight, how is it free and democratic? Maria, like, are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Um, yes, I am. I think before the pandemic, a lot of Canadians were not aware of what's on the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. And I think with this pandemic, many of us woke up, including myself, and there's a lot of missing things in the Charter. And so we're actually realizing what's really missing. So it's not free and democratic.
Yeah, and
And
this
in
is
fact, I don't know what the definition of democracy really is. I'm confused.
exactly. What is this free? What is this democracy? How are we free? We saw the charter. There's severe limitations. Yes, we did see that. Uh, I'm just looking at that one comment. We're going to get about the pastor Maria, um, and we actually discussed this at our last constitutional dialogue. In our opinion, the pastor was used as an example of intimidation. He was incarcerated for 2 days and then he was released. But that just shows the limits of our rights and freedoms. Jesse?
Yeah, Pastor Arthur,
Yes.
he ended up still wanting to have his right to religion, which it's supposed to be allowed to congregate for and be able to practice religion, and he was targeted when there's many other religious gatherings, there's many other bar gatherings, there's many other Costco gatherings that have a lot more people than him, but because he defied the health authorities request, and he made it public. It went all around the world about how he defied them, and they wanted to make an example of him. And how can we as a society deem that that's okay to make an example out of a pastor that's and he feeds the homeless. He's been doing it for 20 years. They arrested him like a common criminal, like a thug, dragged him, made him get on his hands and knees in the rain. And so this is unacceptable in a democratic and free society. So we either have freedom or we don't, and by the looks of that, we do not have the freedoms that we all think we do.
Yeah, excellent point. Again, it comes back to our point earlier. Who's the government decide what's essential and what's non-essential? So you can go to the big box stores and shop with the crowds of people, but you can't congregate in a church. Who's the government to decide that, Jesse? That's arbitrary. That's a bias of them. It's like deciding that person's an essential worker, that person's not an essential worker. It's similar. But the way he was treating, the way that pastor was treated, should be a wake up call to people across this country and around the world about what rights and freedoms we really do have. And I argue that in Canada we're living in a soft tyranny. It's top down governance, and they're coming at us from all sides, making us more and more dependent on the government.
And if
It's very
they,
troubling.
yeah, and if they
The
can do
best,
that
the
to a
best thing,
pastor,
the best thing we can do is stand up to the government. in whatever way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and if they can do that to a pastor, what makes you think that they're not going to come for you?
Well, they targeted that particular pastor because he's not in a big church. They don't. He doesn't have a lot of money relative to the establishment churches. He's an easy target. And he's been targeted by the city of Calgary in the past. He couldn't get permits, etc. Jesse?
Oh, he's been thrown in jail. He's gotten
Yeah.
hundreds of fines, and this is for feeding homeless people, for doing his duty as he believes his Christian duty to help people. And he's out there exercising that right, preaching the word of God, and then being targeted by this municipality, being targeted, whether it's federal, he's exposed a lot of corruption. So he's someone who they're looking to make an example of, and we all saw that in the videos that have been broadcasted.
Yeah, terrible situation. And the fact that he was released after 2 days shows that they weren't confident in what they were doing, Jesse.
Yeah, the pastor in Edmonton, they had him locked up for about a month. For kind of the same thing. There wasn't any videos or anything that I had seen about it, but they had locked him up for a month, and there were major protests, major things going on, and finally they released him. So Pastor Arthur is the second pastor in Alberta that they have targeted, in the last, say 4 months.
It could be anyone else. It could be anyone else. That should be a wake-up call. I don't understand what's happening to this country. It's becoming more top-down. And we see the machinations of what we're dealing, the machinations of the state. And they're arrogant. They're violating our rights and freedoms. They're to the point where they're even imprisoning people arbitrarily. This is the reality of the situation. And we see from the charter that it's a top-down charter. It's not rooted in the will of the people. And this is a real concern. We're going to get to the comments now. I'm going to show them. Tammy says we now have to show medical proof that we can't wear a mask here in Alberta. And I find this really ironic, Maria, that the government isn't required to show medical proof to deprive us of our rights and freedoms, yet we're required to show medical proof why we can't wear a mask. So let's be careful on this topic, Maria, because we can't. We got to avoid censorship. But do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's really crazy because unless you can prove that wearing this is healthy for us, all the studies, all the peer review reports says it's not good for us, but yet the government is mandating that we have to wear them. So it's like telling us that smoking is good for us.
Yeah,
and
again,
mandating.
This is top-down governance.
Yeah.
Right. This is the top-down governance dictating to the people.
Yeah.
This is. I would argue this is where we're headed. More dependency. We get into what's that called? The universal basic income. Right, where we're getting into a centralized, digitalized currency, et cetera, a more and more dependency on government.
And one last thing is that I don't know if I could use this word, but there is an agenda of depopulation. So the mass will make us sick, and so will the dab.
Yeah.
The dab and this will make us sick. So there's an agenda for depopulation.
Everything that they're doing is, in order to make us sick, whether it's the physical distancing, keeping us locked in our homes,
Yep.
with, stopping us from breathing, stuff they're wanting to inject. This is all about decreasing immunity and getting people to the point where, they cannot fight back against the government tyranny. So, when do we have our people actually stand up to our corrupt government and stop the nefariousness that's harming everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent point. Just understand that this has been going on for decades. This isn't something new.
Yeah.
Maria, could you mute yourself just because I'm getting an echo at your end?
Yeah, I wasn't quite finished
Okay,
with what
go
I
ahead.
was
Go
saying.
ahead.
Yeah, so on top of what I just said, all that, there's also things that are happening in the sky, like the geoengineering, and all the GMO, the chemicals, the pesticides that we're inhaling and taking in every day. So there's a lot of things going on. So that's all I'm
Yeah,
gonna say. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
fair enough. It's important to remember that through the AI technocracy, through 5G, through the Great Reset, go look up the World Economic Forum. It's it's a combination of the physical, biological, and digital all into one. Um, there's been reports out of the government that we're going to lose up to 40% of our jobs. Jesse, through self-driving vehicles, AI, robotics, etc., drones. Uh, so maybe that will be part of it. We have too many people, Jesse. I'm not justifying what they're doing. I'm trying to. It's important people understand what's going on with their agenda. They call it the fourth industrial revolution.
And this is inevitable to happening for us to have technology to be able to help make it easier for society. But we need to be able to protect our citizens to be able to, survive when technology starts to, come into almost every facet of our life. Because, for us to just say, we want to stop technology is not really, how, we can live as in a democratic society. But we need to be able to protect our citizens, no matter what is coming. We have to have that mandated that everybody, has to have the right to food, water, and shelter. Like that's, without that, if, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And if we're not protecting everyone, then, we are not, a solid foundation for society.
Yeah, and there's a number of scientific reports um, linking 5G technology to infertility in men and women, and also a greater propensity for miscarriage in pregnant women. Um, so that's a real concern there. Like I said, this is scientifically based, and it was interesting. Just last week, data came out that U.S. birth rates are at um, uh, a low for the last decade. And this is coinciding with a massive rollout of 5G in the US. Is there a connection between the two? I'd say, based on science, there is, Jesse.
Yeah, so I've spoken to a lot of different people on that, and we know that anything 60 gigahertz is harmful. There's, obviously we need to have technology, but, there's even studies that just having Wi-Fi in schools are having issues. So that's why some schools around the world actually ban Wi-Fi inside the schools because of the, effects that it does have on the students.
Yeah, here's I'm going to get to this comment. This is Philip. It's unfortunate he couldn't have joined us, but at least he can share his comments here. I'm going to read it out. The Constitution is a framework or code of laws by which the government must operate in compact with the citizenry, who elects representatives to address and manage issues of management of the state. So the problem here with this framework code of laws, it's being circumvented, as we saw over the last year and a half, Jesse. Right? So, and I would argue that the charter was created by the establishment. It's working for the establishment. And we can see that by what's not in there. There's no right to privacy. There's no right to self-defense, et cetera, in there. And the government has the means to override it as well. This is a big problem for the country. We're going to shift to the next comment here.
I just wanted to add
Go ahead. Go ahead.
that, yeah, so, the way that it is right now, as we spoke before, the whole system is protecting the establishment. And, whether it's the police, the military, it's all about the establishment protecting their interests and not the interests of the people. Things have gotten twisted and things have gotten corrupted, and we really need to take back our country. So this is what we need to figure out.
Yeah, and it comes back to the saying government of, by, for the people. Like I said, everything points to a soft tyranny in Canada, top-down governments, nanny government, dependency by the people, more and more dependency on government, attack on small business. This is coming on so many different levels. Tax on our basic freedoms and rights, intimidation of society as a whole, the use of fear. All this stuff is going on. Surveillance grid going up. Very troubling. So here, Philip writes, a nation's government that operates or can operate without a basic code of law or ethics is capable of abuse of trust in responsibility to a citizen. Of course. And what we're seeing is top-down governments by entrenched establishment. And there's a facade of democracy. And it has state machinations, the media, multi-controlled opposition, the courts, certain corporations, special interests. That's the reality of it.
And it's being run by foreign entities. It's, the people that are in our government at the top is not, they're just puppets.
Yes,
so
they are.
We are actually being run by foreign governments or foreign entities or, shadow government, whatever you want to call it. But there's actually people that are running this country that aren't Canadians. And that is completely unacceptable.
Yeah, I would argue the primary organization running this country are the central banks. And we saw over the last year the extreme money supply printing. And a lot of Canadians don't understand that issue, but it's vertical. They're printing the Canadian currency, which is devaluing the Canadian dollar. So your savings is reducing in value. It's like a tax. That's what's going on. And where's all that money going?
Foreign
Where's
entities.
all that? I didn't receive any. I actually don't want any from the government, right? The less I get from the government, the better. There's Philip there. I can't hear him. Hopefully he can resolve that. But that's another issue.
And they're giving away a lot of this money and a lot of the wealth stuff that they're printing away to foreign entities, to foreign governments, for foreign causes. So not only are we devaluing our money because they're printing so much, it's not benefiting Canadians, it's benefiting other people in other parts of the world.
Yeah, exactly. Here's his comment. Generations of men and women have built this nation through farming the land, mining the resources, harvesting our unfathomable wealth. Those same men and women have stood as foundational shields of freedom, bearing arms of foundations of defense. So all these basic values, the roots of the country, they are just slipping away, as shown in that comment. And it goes on to here. These brave people who came before have allowed us such great freedoms that we have enjoyed until so very recently. It is a shame and betrayal of those through their sweat and toil, even blood struggled to build this nation, of course. 100% on that. That's historical context of where we're at. But I would argue this has been going on since at least 1971 when we shifted the ability of the Bank of Canada to print our currency to central banks. The Bank of Canada is not a bank of the people. It is now a central bank, part of the central banking cartel. All this debt that's been built up right now, over 1 trillion federally, who benefits the most?
Bankers.
Bankers. Why? All the debt service payments. And when interest rates go up, those debt service payments go up.
And that was Pierre Elliott Trudeau that actually signed over Canadians' printing rights to the banks. I believe it was in 76.
71. But Jesse, no previous government, subsequent government did anything about it. And we saw in 2005, if you look at the monetary supply, it shot up like this. And during the last year, it went straight up. They've added over the this last 2 years, there's going to be about a $500 billion debt added. $500 billion debt.
So maybe as well as our constitutional separation of church and state, religion and state, what needs to happen is separation of bank and state and separation of corporation and state that needs to happen on a national and international level for all of our nations that have had this corporate, because banks are corporations, takeover that they've just slowly, incrementally squeezed their way in and are dominating all aspects of our society. So we need protection from that and from our politicians who are obviously all in bed with them, and our health ministers too. From the look of it, they all seem to be working together in synchronicity. So that's an enormous challenge, I think, for all Canadians. The mess we're in is a huge challenge, and it's not going to be an easy fight. That would be my
Yeah, excellent point, Richard. This is the entrenched establishment. There's a revolving door between the establishment governments and these corporations. For example, I remember when I was back east last year, a Liberal MP resigned. I stepped down, Jesse, and he went straight into the Bank of Montreal boardroom. So it's a revolving door back and forth. And we see it internationally. The previous fine minister, he's now working in the UN. So it's all webbed here with these globalist institutions.
Yeah, and the EU is not a democracy at all. They're appointed. The head of the EU is, and most of them are bankers. During the bailout with Greece, they had a banker was appointed ahead of the head of Greece as part of the conditions for the bailout.
Yeah, so those are the people that are really running society, and the political people on the front, like Trudeau and anyone else up there, it's just a stage. They're just puppets there. But I would argue it's the bankers that are running. Look at the Federal Reserve in the U.S. What a mess down there. It's no different up here. But the money supply, the fiscal and monetary policy in the U.S., no different than up here in other Western countries, is abysmal. Now there's rapid inflation that's happening, and the people are going to be really suffering.
And it's the system that's corrupted. So it doesn't matter
Completely
if it doesn't matter if it's conservative, doesn't matter if it's liberal, it doesn't matter who gets in there. If the system is corrupted and the system is owned, if the bankers own the police, the bankers own the judges, the bankers own all of the money, then they make the rules, and it's the system that needs to be changed or brought down, or something's got to do with it, because even, you know, the NCA getting in there, if the system is still corrupted, then what can we actually do to stop the corrupted system besides bringing down the system and creating something new that protects the Canadian people's interest first?
Yeah, or we have a governance policy, Jesse, on empowering the Canadian electorate in terms of legislation, referendum, recall, those type of things. But I think the big problem in these governments is the bureaucracy there. That's and that in the case of the federal government, the Privy Council, the deep state, they are running things in the background. The political entities are just fronts. It's a facade of democracy. And when you ask them about the banking issue, they say it's good for the economy. That's what they say. They say all this debt piling up is good for the economy. This is Orwellian doublespeak garbage, Marcine.
100%.
Unbelievable.
It's them only. It does not serve the people.
Yeah. And we're talking about the fiscal monetary policy, the massive debts, Marcine, and we're arguing that central banks run this country, run any other Western nation.
The central banks run the world, and they have for
There you go.
hundreds of years.
Yeah, this is the reality. So I come back to our fundamental question. Where's the free and democratic society? Where is it?
It's
Well,
been
we don't have it.
sliding away.
We have it on
decades.
we have it on paper. We have a theoretical democracy.
Yeah, that's the problem with the courts. They operate in the theoretical realm, not in the reality on the ground.
Right.
Quite right.
It's democracy for them, but a different plan for us.
Oh, yeah. This is a good one here. Jack, he said rights aren't God-given nor government granted. So he's saying there's something innate in fundamental rights. The right to defend your family, the right to reasonable privacy, the right to peacefully assemble, the right to freedom of speech.
Life, liberty, and security.
It's not for the government to decide, oh, you can go to the box store in high numbers, but you can't go to your church.
Yeah, we're living in tyranny.
I call it a soft tyranny, Jesse.
Yeah, that's actually I find that an excellent description of what's happening in Canada. Bonnie Henry's been so good with the soft sell, because that's basically she's wooing people into slavery. She was profiled in New York Times articles. She's one of the poster girls for this whole pandemic, and that's her method, is the soft sell. So yeah, it's a really great way of putting it.
Yeah, excellent. Here's this,
Can
Jack.
I say?
Go ahead. Go
Oh.
ahead, Maria.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, we are in the state of emergency, so perhaps, well, under the state of emergency, they have all kinds of powers, so perhaps we need to adjust or change the state of emergency, revise it, so that they don't have so much power.
Yeah, and that's another gateway to override our rights and freedoms.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we got Jack here. Excellent point. Self-defense. It's illegal in these lands, especially against a new resident too. Right. That's what he's arguing.
Wow.
But it could be against anyone. The government doesn't want you to be empowered. They want you dependent on them. They want you watching their media. They want you programmed. They want you obeying what they're saying. They don't want you to be independent, free thinking.
No, when the people are thinking, we're dangerous.
Yes.
We're only
Here's this.
dangerous. We're only dangerous to them.
Yes.
Exactly. When the people are thinking, we are a danger to them. We, the people.
It says here, countless peoples have immigrated to this nation for an opportunity at freedom. Many of those sought an opportunity at their own self-determination. Those freedoms sought by those who have taken up roots to restart this new land are now disappearing. And worse yet, the shadows of tyranny past are looming large in what should be a nation of refuge. It's very, very troubling what's happening to this country and other Western countries and our friends in Asia and South America, Central America, Africa, Middle East, you name it. This is a global phenomenon. It's not restricted to Western countries. Look at our friends, the Chinese, what they're enduring, the type of society they're living in. There's I think there's one facial recognition camera for every two Chinese people.
And not
They
just
live
that, they actually, if they go against what the government is saying, they actually take them, kidnap them, and kill them. Like it's like they're going through, and this has been going through hundreds of years. Like it's the opposite of what a free society is, blatant in the face. And that's where we're all headed if we don't stop these psychopaths from doing that to Canada.
That's
exactly, exactly.
True.
And there's this
They have the social credit system as well.
yeah. Apparently, Jack thinks we're reaching people like different organizations. We're reaching millions. We're shaking the tree of the so-called New World Order. So, and that's an important message, everyone. Your voice matters. We're going to do more of these events. They don't want us talking like this. But this is what we're seeing today. This is a free and democratic society within our bubble here, isn't it?
It is.
We are allowed. We are.
Except there's overarching sense that we're doing something wrong. I mean, we have to be careful of our words. We can't say this. We can't go there. You know, that is not free.
Exactly.
But we are assembling, we are discussing, and we're trying to figure out solutions on how we can protect ourselves and our fellow citizens. And that's why we need everybody to share this out. If you're listening, we need everybody to get as many people to come in on these discussions. And if you resonate with us, join the NCA party, because, you know, strength in numbers, the more people we have, the more powerful we become, and then we can actually make a difference and protect, you know, our citizens, like, you know, we are here, you know, trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. And here's a good comment here.
Nicely said.
Yeah, she's from Sweden, this lady, and they have massive deployment of 5G. And there's the science. I'm not going to get into this tonight, but the science on the EMF radiation is well documented. But this 5G is all part of the establishment, the banks, the central banks, and their agenda to push this merge of physical, biological, and digital all into one, what's called an AI technocracy. This is what is the Great Reset. 5G, 6G, 7G, that's the technological gateway to implementing this system. So be wary of this, and we will do more on this issue as well. We're not against technology at NCA, but we put public health, public privacy first. And we're not going to allow a technology in our society that's going to have that's going to harm our people. There hasn't been sufficient testing on this technology to be allowed in the public domain. But we'll do a special panel on that, Jesse. This year, Marcin, the Magna Carta of the Church is protected under Clause 1. Excellent point. Yet, under our charter, the Church has no protection. Jesse, look at the pastor.
Yeah, brutal.
Brutal.
Yeah, what a disgrace. Quite right.
Oh, look at this. This is the fear in our society. People worried about agents coming knocking on the doors looking for you.
We're not very far from that, unfortunately.
Yes, yes.
Well, it's already happening here in Vancouver with some of the people at the rally. Some of the leaders have had RCMP at their door already.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was just talking live to Jason Christoff. He's in Ontario, and he's a big public speaker. He was speaking at a rally with 6 other people, and then they all came and they gave them all fines for just speaking at a rally.
There you go.
Wow, that's shocking.
And
You know,
I'm
it's a
looking
good
at
thing
the
that we have this platform. Otherwise, this is not published. I mean, it's not in the news. So if it doesn't show
yeah.
up on
Yeah,
somebody's
no.
video, we
We're
don't
going
know
to do
these
more.
things.
Yeah, I'm just going to read this long comment here. We must be aware to the use of new applied laws that are being applied with forever expanding potential turned around in another lens. A government that serves and respects the people will serve in a just fashion. A government that has contempt for the people will breach the basic rules and limitations on how it may act. To be able to expand and gain control, a regime looking to force ethos change and political stance, there's usually upheaval. As seen in the past, a different look at the strategy imposed today in policy could be parallel by occupational forces utilizing media, anti-partisan tactics, limited groups, communications, and additional restricting mobility. So I think we're all in agreement that this free and democracy thing is a theoretical idea. It's not reality. Governance is
real.
top down, it's dictated. Central banks are controlling this country and many others. They're controlling the world. And there's a facade of democracy. This is what our struggle is now. And there's a number of people who are benefiting from this. Jesse, they are, kind of like when there was a bad regime, there's people that go along with it, right? And that's what we have now. And they're doing everything to suppress us, but at least we know what we're up against. I really wish they'd stop targeting Pastor Archer. We need to stand united together and take down top governance system altogether. It is top down, Christopher. We are in an economic shift effort to change the economic framework of Canada, where the wealth pyramid slope will drop. Yes, there'll be a greater difference between haves and haves not. We're seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah, the middle class has all but disappeared.
Yeah, especially when they implement the centralized digitalized currency, the universal basic income. Imagine what kind of world we're going to have when 40 to 50% of us don't have jobs because of the AI technocracy. Think about it. Then you factor in depopulation and all this other stuff going on, the mass surveillance, what kind of world are we going to live in?
Not a free one.
Yeah, everything they do in the name of good health actually has the opposite effect. Yeah, on so many different levels, especially with small business. Um, I've got friends with small bit. They've closed their doors for good.
If
And
the
there's thousands.
if the government truly cared about the people's health, then they would be mandating exercise, nutrition. They would be doing things to help people to increase immunity, not do everything to, to harm humans. And so governments right now, the way it's running is not there to protect you. And whatever they're doing, it's for their own interest and not in any way, shape, or form to benefit you, your health, your family, your children in any way.
Yeah. So these pensions, the Canadian pensions, are used. Um, it's part of this central banking, Marcin. They were investing in India. They're investing in China, wherever they want. They're using it. The establishment using it to gain influence.
Your birth certificate, you are nothing but a chattel that they've been using since the moment you took a breath.
Jesse?
Yeah, since not since you take a breath, but since your parents filed your birth certificate. Soon as you're registered with a filed birth certificate, that's when, you've actually been legally owned by your government.
That's correct.
And there's this comment here. We're just getting to the end of our comments. Yeah, there's something here about every 30 days they have to keep extending the emergency powers. Richard?
Yeah, I think that's happening right here.
Okay.
In BC on the 26th, the health orders expire, and then they're going to, give a new set. It's just a never ending thing,
Right.
carrot before the ahead of the stick, keep people thinking there's some hope around the corner.
Yeah.
But they're managing us. That's what they're doing. They're
Yeah, completely.
we're being managed on all
Yes.
sides, as you pointed out.
More deceit and more lies.
Well, I know in the U.S. Constitution they have one of their points is that they can have the right to militia to protect themselves from enemies, foreign and domestic. And do we have anything in Canada, for to protect ourselves, for a right to, to have against nefarious governments? Like, is there anything that we have to protect ourselves in that way?
Yeah, exactly. And this is interesting, the coordination between federal and provincial, municipal, and these same governments, these same establishment governments are all implementing UN Agenda 2030, which is the policy, national policy framework for the Great Reset, which was adopted by the Harper regime in 2015. So it's all interconnected. See this one, Jesse, on the birth certificate?
No.
That's very true. Back in 1960, they were going to put me in jail if I didn't sign up my son for his birth certificate. It was required.
Yeah, this is mandatory slavery.
Yeah, mandatory. Yeah, right there.
Mandatory slavery.
She wasn't going to go with it, and they threatened to put her in jail if she didn't.
I'm not sure if the Amish people register themselves. I know they have kind of their own, communities, and I'm not sure how, far there are, in intertwined with what the government does. So I know there are some possible free people, but in order to live in society right now, you have to sign away your children's rights to the government, and then hence that's just slavery. So it's right in our face slavery that they're masking as freedom.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Look at this. And this, we were talking about essential, non-essential, and excellent point by Philip here. Joseph Stalin had a similar term. They were called useless brothers. I'm assuming brothers,
Breathers.
useless brothers,
Useless
breathers.
useless
Yeah, breathers. That's pretty
breather.
harsh.
Yeah.
And they're calling us useless eaters. So
Child.
because
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So we're gonna sum it up here. Are we
Told
all
us
are we all in agreement that this is a soft tyranny here?
I think it's total tyranny that, people have just been blinded by the, dangling the golden carrot. But I think we live in a total tyranny, like,
Yeah.
slavery since we were born, since our parents were born. It's just, they give us the illusion of freedom of choice. Look at the machines, the voting machines that have been corrupted. So even if, there's a popular party that comes around, they probably wouldn't even get into power because they need to keep control, so they do what they can to cheat or lie, cheat, and steal. And that's what we're from our top down, that's the example that is being set throughout society, hence why we have the crime that we do. That's why we have the confusion, the chaos, because of the example that is set to us from these people that are running things that are actual criminals.
Yeah.
I think we're fairly
Richard, any
complacent.
comment?
Yeah, I'd just say, soft tyranny pretty well sums it up. It's the hard tyranny might be coming just around the corner. We got a border checks here in BC to get outside of the lower mainland, and now there's border checks at Ontario border. So I think that's kind of the sign that the hard tyranny might be coming.
Yeah. It's important people to understand. I think we're all in agreement that central banks are running this country. Central banks are literally running the world. Are we all in agreement on that?
100%.
Yep.
And we could, are we all in agreement that this notion of free and democratic society, which is the foundation for the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, right? That's the foundation of it, a free and democratic society, at least in theoretical terms, that's has no relevancy to on the ground reality in Canada?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd agree.
If we're living in a soft tyranny, that's not free and democratic.
No.
So we have serious challenges here. We have democratic challenges. There's a facade of democracy where the people are basically battling the state machine nations. They're taking our money too, our wealth, and using it against us. It's like a big parasite feeding off the people of this country. Would you say, Jesse?
100%.
Marcin, are you in agreement with that?
Absolutely. I don't think we've, in my entire life, I don't think I've experienced democracy or freedom.
The whole system has been set up for this too, isn't it? To protect the establishment. The central bankers and all those benefiting from them.
That's exactly
Are we
what
in agreement on that?
The system,
The media. The
system
media
is
works for
created
them.
Yeah, the
Yes, it
media
does.
is just an arm of the corporate.
Just an arm of it, isn't it?
Yeah, we've
Yep.
seen propaganda machines elsewhere in history, but we never thought it was going to be here. And like the last year, they really came out of the closet. It was already there. It wasn't like it just suddenly appeared. They were already there and set up, but they were being very careful about how they um, uh, programmed people. But now they're just full court press. I've got global news on my Facebook news feed, and there's nothing global about it. It's just nonstop COVID. I even made a comment. You guys should change your name to COVID news because there's nothing global. You guys, do you know there's thousands of troops on the Russian border? They never even mentioned anything going on.
Please don't use that word.
Which word?
The C word.
Oh,
Well, yeah, the C word.
I
it's
say karate.
Lockdown. I call it lockdown virus.
Karaoke virus. So yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to go further with our thought today, everyone. So everything's pointing to a soft tyranny. It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's like everything that is presented on the surface is actually the reverse behind the scenes.
It's a very interesting time because we're forced to think about important in this life.
And do something about it.
Yeah.
And
So you think are we in agreement that dialogues like this is beneficial?
Oh yeah.
I think it's very important, more important than ever.
And we have a right. Well, I'm not going to talk about rights, but we have an obligation to our fellow citizens to speak up, don't we?
I believe that's true.
Yeah. These are like mini town hall meetings, and
Yeah, we have an obligation as fellow citizens to speak up when we see wrongdoing, when we see threats to our people, and it's just, to me, it's unbelievable that how long this has been able to be perpetuated. It just shows the power of the machinations. I would argue the Stalin regime was a hard tyranny, but you could make the case, Richard, that the soft tyranny is actually worse. It's so the subversion,
deception.
Yeah, the deception, Marcin. You could argue that overall it's probably worse. At least the Stalin, you knew what you were dealing with. It was very upfront, right? Even though he killed 100 million people plus.
Yes. But they told you what was going to happen to you if you went against them. They told you we're going to send you to Siberia. So you knew that what the score was, but that's not what's happening here.
Here it's all based on deception, fraud, political fronts, fake media. The whole thing is based on dishonesty, based on a lie.
They're the great deceivers. They continue to say what they're doing, but they do it in such a deceptive fashion that people don't believe it's actually happening. But it's been slipping away for 20 years now, and suddenly in this recast, they become very emboldened with their agenda. It's always been there.
Yeah.
It's just emboldened. They're so emboldened now.
Just keep in mind there will be other means of coming up. They'll be using other methods to control the people. So we're going to stay on top of it, of NCA, and we're going to continue to monitor what's going on in our society with their deployments and their tactics. We have to call this out, not only for Canadians, Jesse, but for all of humanity.
We have to be an example.
Yes.
And we supposedly live in a free and democratic society, but when has any of you actually voted on any issues that matter? When have you actually had a vote where you actually thought that your vote counted, on something that they wanted to do, whether it comes the lockdown or whether it comes to foreign investment? That's just whoever gets put into government, They choose what happens. They don't ask the people. They're not doing it for the people. They're doing it for their own self-interest. So we're not in a free society, and the whole reason why we're doing what we're doing and why we're putting our necks out and our reputations out on the line is because this is important. What else are we here for than to fix the problems that we all face together?
Exactly. And we have I believe we have an obligation to ourselves, our families, and to our fellow citizens. But I appreciate what Bonnie here is saying, everyone, about the provinces uniting, but they have to realize that a lot of these municipalities, provinces are in bed with the federal government's agenda. So it's not like the federal against the provinces. They're in bed with the federal government. Just look at Ford in Ontario, right? So people need to realize that it's not just the federal government.
It's the people against the establishment.
Yeah. And those provincial governments are extensions of the federal government. They're all part of the establishment right now.
And if
The
you're
only
listening,
the only one that might not be would be the Bloc
and
right now.
if you're listening, whether you're involved with, the medical industry, doctors, nurses, or you're involved with the police, or you're involved with the military, you are not the establishment. Whether or not you're in a position that protects them, you are not, because they will not protect you. They're protecting themselves. You're just a useless breather, just like everybody else that's trying to fight for our freedoms here.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, and I want to stress, as just prior to closing, that this is not something new. It's been in the work for decades, going
Mhm.
back to post World War II. It's amping up now. It's not too late, but we need to speak up. But this is an issue of these establishment entities against the people who they're supposed to represent. That's the bottom line. The government is not working for the people.
Never has.
It is not.
Never has.
It is not.
And that's the truth of it. We're going to keep calling it out, and we look forward to the next session. Any other comments from our panel?
Thank
Well,
you
we
again for the opportunity to keep talking, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for inviting me. You're a great facilitator, by the way. Good job.
Oh, okay, excellent. No, I'm really enjoying this. This is our passion. I know it's Jesse's passion, Marcine and Richard, and I want to thank all of you for coming. And hopefully we can have Philip and other people come on. If you want to be part of this, join us. And we will be doing these at least twice a month now, as much as we can. We're going to talk about the most important issues. I want to wish everyone the best, and keep up the good fight.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for all that you're
Thank you.
doing to
Thank you.
make this happen for us, because you have passion, and you're inspiring all of us. So everybody that's listening, please get everybody that to be a part of at least these discussions. And maybe you don't want to join the party right away, but at least be part of the discussions, because all of our voices matter. And at the NCA, we want to make it paramount that everybody knows that all of your voices matter. We want to hear everybody, because you're just as important as each and every single one of us here speaking today.
And obviously, it could not be more critical right now with what's going on. And we reached complete consensus today on some really core issues. Great stuff. Thank you, Bonnie. Everyone, please share this so we can get the message out. And we look forward to the next dialogue